The Sligo Show is produced by Pixel Productions and hosted by Brendan Tierney. If you need video for your business or live event or would like to appear on the show, send us a message today.
So hello and welcome to another episode of The Sligo Show with myself, Brendan Tierney. We're here in the lovely Baymount room in the business suite at the Radisson Hotel in Sligo. So we'd like to thank the guys for letting us use their space. And today, I'm a big sports fan and I've been looking to interview Micheal for a while now. So Micheal O'Donnell, most people will know him now from being the main anchorman for TG4's, well, the GAA mainly, but that wasn't always the only sport we've seen you anchoring on TG4. So it's very, very nice to have you on the Sligo Show and thanks for coming in.
You're welcome, Brendan. Glad to be here.
So the first place I would have seen you years ago was the presenter of Ole Ole, which was a Spanish soccer magazine show, I suppose you could say, on TG4. And was that your first time in front of a camera?
It was, yeah. It was amazing. I mean, God, you're going back over 20 years now. So I suppose TG4 had formed in '96 and it just found itself in that little niche of trying to discover what programs would work. Yeah. So a friend of mine had an interest in sport and said, I don't know how it actually happened that he got in touch with Spanish people in terms of football. But anyway, there was he developed to the point where they were happy to sell certain Irish language rights.
Okay.
And he had a little bit of, I suppose, issues around contracts and stuff like that. And I had lived in Spain for a number of years, so he asked me would I come in and just talk to people on the phone.
To be the translator, like.
To do a little bit of that. And so I gave him a hand. I was living in Ring, where I'm from at the time.
In Waterford.
In Waterford, okay. Yes. And I was teaching there at the time. And I went in one afternoon after work and we sorted out those small issues. And he got his contract sorted. And then a couple of weeks later, then he came back to me and said, would you be interested in working on this program? So I said, maybe. You know, I didn't know. I mean, I had no idea about broadcasting.
That's what I was going to say. Just to be clear, you'd never even done anything locally, a little bit of video, or had you done theatre? Had you done performance of any kind at all? Or?
No, I tell you, I had worked on the other side of the camera.
Oh, okay.
So I had, when I came back, as I said, I lived away. I was in Spain, and when I came back, I spent around 2 years working as a camera operator. So I had seen the other side of it. So I'd worked in all sorts of different programs, you know, studio programs, live matches, all the rest of that for, you know, different broadcasters around the country. So I kind of had an idea as to what the thing was about, but I'd never worked in front of the camera.
Yeah,
it was
it's a different
absolutely
world.
a first different world. So anyway, we kind of had to do some screen testing and all the rest of that and make sure that the powers that be were happy with it. And then they gave us the green light and off we went. And we spent, I think, 3 years doing Ole Ole, which meant going over and back to Spain. We also did a season of Scottish football, which coincided with Rangers were going for a 10 in a row, if you remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Celtic were doing their best to stop them. And that happened to be our season. And Celtic did it that year.
Wow. Who was the stars? Was that like DeCanio? Was those guys? Was that?
It was Henrik Larsson was
Larsson
the main
one.
Yeah. And I remember we got that was the thing with football back in those days. I mean, whether it was Spain or in Scotland, you got great access to players. So I remember after Celtic beat, I think it was St Johnstone in their last game to win the league, and they were doing their lap of honour. We were allowed on the field with them, myself, my camera guy, going around the field, joining in the lap of honour, interviewing the players as they were walking around. You know, this kind of stuff, you never get near that kind of thing now.
Yeah. Too much red tape and
too much red tape and too many minders and all the rest. And I remember even in Spain when we used to travel over every couple of weekends. So the idea was this was a highlights program. Yeah. So went out every week, every Monday night, and most of those programs were recorded in studio back in Ring.
Okay.
But every 3 weeks or so, just to liven it up, we used to travel over to Spain. So we go to the new camp in Barcelona, or we go to Madrid, or we went to Seville on one occasion, and we'd record my pieces to camera there. So my little introductions to our first match tonight is whatever. So we go over and we do those, and then we'd fly back. We'd have tapes with us, those things.
Yeah. So if they got lost, you had no tape.
Yeah. So we had to bring the tapes back with us. And then we'd edit them together and everything would go out. It was nuts, absolutely nuts. We had no sleep whatsoever.
Yeah, I was going to say, there must have been like no time to get all these clips. And how many matches would you have shown in the highlights?
So we'd have all of them. So I presume there was like 10
the Spanish
matches.
media gave you some of their tapes, obviously. Or
no, so there were 2 tapes. So we would go over. So if our match was in the new camp on a Saturday night, for example, so we would have to fly over on the Friday because you wouldn't get in on the flight in time on the Saturday. So you'd have to fly over on the Friday, you do preliminary work and a bit of research on the Saturday morning. You go and do the match Saturday evening, and we'd fly back, myself and my camera guy, on the Sunday morning. So we'd fly back into Dublin, straight down the road, into studio for 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and we'd start editing the main match. And we'd have to cut that down to around 20 minutes and get a commentary done on it. So in the meantime, another person was going off to Spain from our team to get the highlights tape. So that person would fly out on the Saturday, land in, collect the tape on Sunday evening, bring it back, would fly back to Ring on Monday morning with the 10 or the 9 other matches, and would land in to Nematon, where the company was based, at around about 3 o'clock. We always had this thing of somebody was saying, if you're 2 minutes, 3 minutes late, this thing won't get done. So anyway, the person would fly down the road, and God, I mean,
we don't want to. Yeah,
no,
we don't. No speed clocks.
Speeding tickets, and there was no penalty points at the time. In they go, straight into the machine. Stuff would be pulled off. We'd do a really rough cut. We'd have an idea. We'd already have our scripts written because we knew the results and the match reports and everything at the time, and we'd put all this together. The tape would leave to go to Cork. It had to be taxied down to Cork to be played out of the RT studios at around 8 o'clock to go out, I think, at 9. Well, not live, but not at 9 on TG4, and everybody would collapse in a heap at that stage because that was it. Like
there must have been horror stories with tapes lost, broken, or
there were plenty of interesting stories because there were. This is really early kind of digital technology. Like we were, TV was moving from analog to digital. Like there was no such thing. Like it was only in our 3rd year, I think, that we got satellite technology, which meant we didn't have to send people over, and we got this.
Were you a bit disappointed at the same time? Did you like it?
Well, see, we'd still go over to do our recordings, but the person collecting tapes didn't have to do it. So we still collected a tape going over because we were recording pieces to camera there anyway. So satellite technology just about coming in, internet just about coming in. So we were kind of finding our feet big time on the thing, and it was such a learning curve. I mean, for all of us, we were new to TV, and we found out the really kind of on the hoof how to put these programs together.
Just with the skin of your teeth, kind of going, right, we're here now. Like some of the stars, I presume you interviewed tons of stars, did you? Or what was some of the highlights in Spain, especially obviously with some of the mega stars that was there in the stadium?
Well, I remember, I think it was our first game in Spain, and it was the Brazilian Ronaldo, the first Ronaldo, had signed from PSV Eindhoven, and Bobby Robson had brought him. He had been the PSV manager, so he brought this new superstar with them. And we went over, and actually even this was kind of unusual in the sense that nowadays when you go to a match, you collect your press pass, you're put up into the press area, which is usually way up in the stand. You'd have a good view or whatever. But back in those days, they gave you a pass and they said, go on out onto the field and find a spot to sit on. So we'd sit on the side, against advertising hoardings. I'm not sure sponsors were given out, but anyway, they'd let you just sit there, and like I remember there were several times like where the ball would go out of play and they'd come over and you'd pass the ball back to the player. Like it was that close to the action. It was mental. It was nuts. Yeah. So anyway, the Ronaldo, the original Ronaldo, as I say, was playing in his first game. I think it was his first game, and they were playing Espanyol, the local derby rivals. Like so. Anyway. Very much against form, Espanyol scored, so this was like not going to plan. Anyway, Barcelona managed to score an equaliser, and in the last few minutes then, the pitch, which was a new pitch, had started to cut up really badly, and it was coming up like carpet tiles, so it was almost like a beach. By the time that the thing was coming to the last stages, you couldn't play football on it. I was amazed that they didn't call it off or whatever. I suppose they would never do that at that stage, but anyway, Ronaldo got the ball around halfway and he starts weaving his way and hitting it off tussocks and hillocks and all the rest of it, and keeping control of the ball and weaving his way in. And then he passed away, squared the ball to a guy called Pizzi, who was an Argentinian player for Barcelona, and he just put it into the empty net. Game over. Barcelona wins, and the star was born. Yeah,
that was it. But and again, like, did you get to interview many? Were they difficult? Were they nice? Were they?
Well, he was like, okay, so I wouldn't go so far as to say we interviewed him. Like we were in the media scrum with him. So this is the other thing. You see these pictures where you got like 20 microphones in the guy's face. So we did that with him. But you would get other players. Like I remember interviewing. Luis Enrique was one for sure. I'm nearly sure we interviewed Guardiola when he was a player.
You must go big at digging back through the footage, those memories.
Yeah. I mean, look, it was unusual because, again, as I say, you'd have much better access than you would now, and a much more informal access. So you'd go into the mix zone afterwards. So I don't know if you know in Barcelona, but you go down so you're on the field, the match is over, the players go down the tunnel, And you've got this very special kind of a setup in the tunnel where there's a little church in the tunnel.
Well,
Coming out onto the new camp, and you'd hear of players nipping in there just before they go out onto the field for a little pray before they go on. It's unusual. So anyway, you go in past the little chapel that they have, and then the mix zone. Now I don't know if it's still there anymore, but would be just inside, just at the top of the steps there. So you go in there, and the players would obviously go in and they'd shower, and then you'd be hanging around waiting, and people would be plugging in microphones and all getting their cameras set up and whatever. And then you do the formal press conference. So whoever the managers were or whatever would be sitting at the top table. Bobby Robson there, side by side with Jose Mourinho, who was his translator at the time.
That's right, of course.
Yeah. And then you do those formal interviews and you get a chance to ask questions and whatever if you wanted to. And then, and we were actually one of the really, really very few English-speaking journalists there.
Okay.
So that was unusual. And I remember even reading the papers the following day, and they'd always say, an English journalist asked so and such a question. And it was like, because it always, there's like wall-to-wall coverage in Spain. You'd have pages and pages of stuff. So then we would go back into the mix zone then. So the formal stuff was done, and then players would just come out and they'd just start appearing, and you'd see so and such a player there and so and such a player here, and you just go over and you'd ask them, would you mind doing a few words for Irish language TV? And I don't think anyone ever turned us down. Wow. So you do a short interview and you'd bring that home, and then you'd mix that in with the and you'd put subtitles on it if it was done in Spanish. Very few of them would have had English. So that was the gist of it.
Would you, was there one crazy moment, amazing moment? Was there a crazy story from after the matches? Did someone bring you out? Did you anything funny or anything mad ever happen that you can tell?
Can't tell you about the aftermath. No, I mean, I suppose the most unusual story was that we used to stay in the same hotel virtually every time. So, it was easy to figure out where you were in relation to the stadium or whatever. So I remember there was one time that we were going to Madrid, and Madrid were playing Barcelona. So, and obviously the big match. And the regular hotel was booked up, and we just randomly picked another hotel. So anyway, myself and my cameraman arrived on the Friday evening, checked into the hotel. Next thing we heard a racket outside on the street, and we looked down, we saw them setting up these crash barriers. So unusual, what's going on? All these Real Madrid supporters, flags, everybody was out and about and starting to make a bit of noise. So anyway, the penny dropped with us. It was obviously something relating to the match happening down here. So we took out the camera, we said, we'll see what's going on. So down we went, and next thing, the Barcelona bus pulls up. So it was the Barcelona team hotel we had happened to book, but just purely by coincidence. So we got great shots of them and whatnot coming in. So in they went anyway, and we followed them in with the camera, and we had the security guys saying, no press in here type of stuff, and we showed them the hotel key, and they went, oh yeah, right.
Nothing we can do here.
Nothing we could do here. So in we went anyway. So we sat down, and we said, okay, we have to be kind of a bit strategic about this now, otherwise they'll get a bit fed up with us. Yeah. So we put the camera back in the room, and we'd wander around just to sort of get the lay of the land in terms of where the players were going to be hanging out and this kind of stuff. So we went down to dinner that night, and literally we were at one table, and there was Rivaldo, I remember, was at the table next to us, and a couple of other players with their agents at different tables, all kind of doing their own thing. So we met the Barcelona goalkeeper, whose name was Hesp. He was a Dutch guy. Now, he wasn't with them for terribly long, but we had, by coincidence, been doing a different program with Packy Bonner in the new camp 6 months previously. I think a program called All Ireland Gold, or World Cup Gold. All Ireland Gold was the previous version of it. And Packy used to present that. And we had been recording this content with him, and I was kind of there as a producer at that stage. And next thing, the Barcelona team happened to be training on the field below, and one of them spotted Packy and brought him down. And then he disappeared then for an hour. So he was brought in to meet the rest of the team and all the rest of it. So anyway, fast forward then to the time that we were staying in the hotel. So we saw Hesp then in the goalkeeper, and went over and said hello to him. We knew he'd probably have English, and how are you doing? And we're over here doing the match tomorrow and all the rest of it. I said, do you remember last summer you were doing the piece, and Packy Bonner was, oh yeah, I remember that. And that broke the ice, and we were able to chat. And I said, look, we're here, we're hoping to do an interview. And he said, that was Van Gaal was in charge of Barcelona at the time. He said, Van Gaal does not let us do anything before the match. I said, oh, that's fair enough. So anyway, we were chatting away for another minute, and he said, you know what, look, if you can get a room, I'd find a couple of minutes to do a piece with you. So anyway, we went to the manager of the hotel. The manager said, all the rooms are booked out except the penthouse. I'll give it to you for nothing. if you give us a little mention and show us the front of the hotel in your report. So up we went anyway, set up the camera and the lighting and whatnot. Brought Hesp up in the service lift so he wouldn't be seen. Brought him in there. We did the interview before the game, the morning of the game. It was fantastic.
And did you broadcast at the correct time then that he wasn't going to get in trouble, or did it matter? He didn't.
Well, we brought it all home, so it was all on the Monday night, so nobody was to know. And I'm sure Barcelona weren't watching TG at the time.
Possibly, yeah.
So, but it was great. So those little things kind of happened from time to time that you'd have just, very unlikely scenarios develop. And they were great. And it was like such fun because like I was 23, 4, 5.
Dreamland.
Dreamland.
Were you a mega sports fan anyways?
Yeah, I was a big soccer fan.
So soccer was your biggest kind of...
Well, see, when I lived in Spain, I lived in Pamplona. And Pamplona is where Osasuna are from, who are in the Spanish Cup final against Real Madrid.
Oh, yes, of course.
First ever final. So, so that I'd be sort of down at the matches anyway. And when the big teams came to town, you'd be shouting and roaring. And then, what is it, a year later or 2 years later, then I was going back, and this time just having the best seat, and it was pinch me moments.
I know,
really.
and then you go, well, it's up to your job nearly, like not get lost in this.
And it's never
moment.
been. And Brendan, I know, people who work in the industry will big this up and say, oh, there's a lot of work goes on. This was just great fun.
Yeah.
And you were doing your hobby, basically, and you were having such crack. And it was just so fortunate. Like, I suppose if I didn't have Spanish and if I didn't have Irish, I'd never have gotten that job.
Yeah, that's such a combination,
Yeah, so, and it was just the right place, right time. And sure, I suppose, you might make a bit of your own luck, but it was great luck, and we're still riding that.
So at that, was there an overlap there? You told me once that you were covering horse racing. Was it point to point or something, or were you?
Yeah, so before, that was in the camera days when I was doing the sort of learning the ropes, if you like. So I would do an awful lot of horse racing, and including
you're a horse racing guru, you told me before as well.
Yeah. 4 legs and a head, that's about it.
So you were more with video there, so it wasn't really... Were you doing any presenting or commentating?
No, absolutely not. Okay. So that was literally as one of the camera operators. And sometimes you were the only camera operator, depending on the size of the meet. But it was the best learning. I was working with so I had done my studying, there was a sort of a very practical training course that Tina G, as it was at the time, had run. And I and lots of others, and actually a lot of those people are still working in the industry. We did like this crash course for, it was a number of months, maybe 3 months or something like that. And then at the end of that, we got work experience, and you had to kind of arrange your own work experience. And I asked the technical team that were providing us with the tuition, I said, could I get some work experience with you guys? So they were a company called TVM. And at the time, TVM were a smallish enough operation. And now they are like enormous. Like they're probably the biggest facility. They are the biggest facilities company in Ireland. So they do sports up and down the country. They do all of the OBs for the GAA, in terms of say. So I was very lucky. I fell in with them, and they said, "You want to work? We'll give you work." Yeah. So you were up and down the country, and as long as you had a car and you were willing to get in early and be, lugging a lot of equipment around and working late and not giving out, they were happy, and they gave me great opportunities. So they started you with a sort of a simple enough scenario, and then they very quickly graduated you up the chain, and I ended up doing all sorts of amazing things. We did rugby internationals and live current affairs programs. Bill Clinton's visit to the Áras, I was doing that.
It's an amazing industry that you get to see these amazing things or opportunities that you don't normally, like when you're a cameraman at a sporting event, is it hard to, it's probably hard to enjoy it, is it? It's so busy. Is it really, really busy? Or is it like you get the groove like after a while?
You don't actually know what the score is. That's the first thing. You don't know who's winning, who's losing, whatever. You're just concentrating on your space or whatever, in terms of, say, the camera that you're operating.
Shouted in your ear.
Yeah, like normally, you do. Like you know that so obviously there's a whole talkback system, and normally it's if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, everything is grand. But you do get
switch off
growly directors from time to time. All right, yeah.
And so you was it then thereafter that did you go straight into GAA presenting, or was there a crossover?
No. So what happened then was we would have kept doing Ole Ole because it was going down really well, and the public enjoyed it, and you even still get people who come up and talk about it. So I think people found it sort of funny that this was the only place you could watch it on Eurosport. So the same as us. Like there was no live Spanish football like there is now. So Eurosport had it at 10, we had it at 9. So that was really important for us because we knew, like, being an Irish language station, the chances were that people would watch it on Eurosport. So we had to be in early. So then Sky came on the market. And that was
hoovered up everything.
Hoovered up everything. And that was the beginning of the end in terms of Spanish football. So they literally went in, signed a big contract with the Spanish Football Association, or whoever the broadcasting company on their behalf were. And that was it. And all the smaller operators then began to get marginalised, including us. Like, we were one of the last in, so we were one of the most vulnerable, let's say. So our head, the person who was one of the founding people at Nemeton, Iriel McMurrough, he had come up with the whole idea, but he had also come up with loads of other ideas. So he had come up with this idea of broadcasting county finals a long way back. Everybody was telling him he was daft, who'd watch those? So then we ended up saying, okay, let's give this a crack now, because now we have like a team who know how to make broadcast matches and whatever. Let's go in and do a live thing and just see. So we went into, I can't remember where the first couple of matches were, but they were probably local, minor or under 21 matches or whatever, club games or something, just to test the waters and see. So that began to sort of take a bit of a hold. And then we got kind of unofficial permission from the GAA to do this, ramp it up a little, because they probably saw that there was such a small market in terms of, say, the amount of matches that were being broadcast at the time. I mean, sure, most of the championship matches weren't even being done by RT. So they said, maybe this is good now, this will be good, and we'll broaden the scope of matches and make it more appealing to people. Because in fairness, you probably knew what was going on in your own county, but you'd hear of these mythical teams like Nemo Rangers or Crossmaglen Rangers or whoever, but you'd never see them because they were up the country or whatever. So we started doing those more formally. And then we broadcast, I think in our first season, something like 8 or 12 matches from county finals. The first one I remember was only up the road in Donegal, and thinking around about 1999 or so. And a lot of learnings in those as well, like technology that was a bit dodgy and all the rest of that. Like, it took a while for that kind of to set in. And nowadays, like, everything is so quick and responsive, and you can stream everything online. And we have matches up and down the country now. Like TG GAA now has, like, you could have 4 or 5 matches a week.
It's mad. Like, how many on average does TG GAA?
Oh God, I don't know, but I know that
no other broadcaster even comes near.
No, and look, Sky are gone out of the market now. But even when Sky and RTE together, they wouldn't have come up to half of what our output entirely was, for a year, because we would be doing, the club championship, the league, ladies football, all the underage stuff, and Sigerson Fitzgibbon, and a lot more besides, schools and colleges and all this kind of thing. So if it's there, we'll
and I often think, like, obviously the big games probably are easier to get information and all that. Like, but if you're going down to an under 20 match or club games, like, it must be so much. I mean, obviously you can't know about every parish or every team, like, but then to go, well, look at me, I know everything about this. Like, it must be an amazing team helping you, and also your own sharpness must. Do you like how? Oh, did I mix up the time, the day, the team name, the wrong person? You know what I mean? Do you kind of block off each game, or do you go, no, I'd really take an interest in that now and read up, or do you have to just be ready for a match, finish match, gone? Could you tell me, like, well, that player now actually scored 1-7 a few weeks, and then he got 2-2, and then, do you know what I mean? Or do you there's so many matches, your brain must just go blank at times.
Well, I can't tell you the amount of people I'm disappointed with my lack of encyclopedic knowledge, first of all, because there's the man who lives down the road from me here in Sligo, and he'd come up to you on a Monday morning, Mick, and he would say, what about that fella who scored that point? And he was nothing like his father, who scored 2-6 in some second round of the league in 1962. And I'd be looking at him like, anyway. So look, it touches on the point that you made already. As you can imagine, there's a great team, first of all, who supply you with information. So we've researchers working on all of the matches, gathering, talking to county boards and PROs and all the rest of it, pulling the match reports together as well, sending that documentation out to you during the week, and then you have to sift through it. And what I would take, as opposed to what our commentary teams would take, would be different. So I'm looking for little bits of colour on players and, form and all this kind of stuff, whereas they're looking for detail on each and every player, because there'll be a gap and a player will be lying on the ground and he'll have 3 things to say about them. So, so we, and then the second point is, I don't remember it all, and I don't know it all.
No.
Absolutely not. So, you go in, you have your facts and figures ready for that particular match. You still make mistakes often. We probably get away with it a little more because not everybody understands what we're saying. So, and that's fine. But I mean, it's, it is sport and it's supposed to be fun. And God, the worst thing you could be is like taking all this very seriously. So, I mean, we make idiots of ourselves from time to time.
Yeah, but I mean, I listened to Colin Parkinson, for example, and he used to say, like, the Sunday game, people slate them every Sunday. He said, these guys have to cover 7 or 8 matches, try and give an opinion, an informed opinion, an analyst opinion. But like, so they've hardly got a chance to really watch and rewind. And so, but like, when you go, say you have a match at 2 o'clock on Sunday, what's your day like? What time are you up? What's the prep? What's the...
Okay, well, obviously you have to get to the match. So you're generally in, if it's way down the country and it's the middle of winter, you're going previous day.
Okay.
So the crew are in from the previous day always, they're setting up, gantries or rolling out cables and setting up cameras and whatnot. Whereas I would come in and I'm nearly one of the last people in then. So you'd generally be in for, say, a half 2 throw in. We would be in at around about 10. As in, I would be in at around 10, and there'd be a number of recordings to do. So obviously we have to check our technical stuff and talkback systems and microphones are working, and that myself and the guests can hear each other, and then that the commentary team can hear us, and that everybody's kind of able to talk to each other, because you don't want that going wrong. And then there would be pre-match interviews to do, so managers would come out and do a bit with us, and then there'd be voiceover recordings to do, and a teaser at the top of the program, etc. You have to break then, have a bit of lunch, and then you're into rehearsal proper then. For the match starts. And then generally, like in the league and in the club championship, we could be on air for around 3/4 of an hour before the match itself.
Yeah,
so that's a lot of time to fill. And we've increased that. There was a time where it was 15 minutes, then they went to half hour, now it's 3/4 of an hour. So then the match itself happens, and then you're on there. You could be on for 2 matches. So then if you're on there for 2 matches, and that would happen very often in the league, you wouldn't be getting out of there until maybe 6 o'clock, and then you're back to Sligo then that night.
And when a match is live, what are you... Like, obviously, I presume you're analysts. They probably have to be really picking out a little thing. Do you be just watching, taking in your own moments that you're going to ask them? Do you have a chat? I'll ask you this. Is that level, or is it...
Yeah. Well, look...
You make your own opinion of watching it yourself. What did I see, and what do you think?
Yeah, so we would typically have anywhere between 2 and 4 analysts per game. So there'll always be an analyst beside me. So our studio is open air umbrellas
on the pitch,
if we need them. So that analyst will always be. So the 2 of us are watching the game. So we're standing on the sideline from our presenting position, but we also have a monitor for replays. So, and we're hearing the commentary team.
Yeah.
So we're chatting as something is happening, and we're making a note, and then the analyst will say, that'd be good to see that at half time. So I'd talk to them inside and say, listen, can you get that clip, that dispossession or whatever.
So it is busy, I'd say, for them to try and watch the match and go and make notes, make sure you get that bit. And then to know that's a bit extra to talk about.
Exactly. Now, not always do you get those clips back, because something will supersede everything, like goals or a sending off or whatever. So that kind of subtle play you may not get to, because you've only 10 minutes in the half time in a club game, and we've around 5 minutes of that as ads. And then you have a bit more flexibility with league, where you got 15 minutes. So you kind of go through those. You're watching the game, but you're chatting, like you and I, if we were at a game. We'd be saying, "Jizz, did you see that? Wasn't that amazing skill? Or wasn't that a terrible thing?" or whatever. And then we try and put those into something. So the guys inside are listening to us, saying that would be great and whatever. And they're already, doing these things. And there was a producer in there who's kind of in charge of this stuff anyway, and deciding on the order of clips and whatever. So then halftime comes, we go to an ad break, and in that ad break, they show those clips to us. So we've got 2 minutes to get ourselves together, know the order in which they're coming, roughly what they're going to show, how many replays and this kind of stuff. And then we come back after the ad break, and we're straight into it, and we do the
So it's a
analysis.
busy mind afternoon. You have to be on the ball, I'd say, the whole time.
Yeah, it is. It's like at the end of the day, you're pretty whacked, because it's there's been an awful lot has gone on. And in particular, when things get really busy, like we did this Super Sunday type of idea, the last round of the league.
I remember saying this, everyone was praising, it was really good.
And that was like we had the 4 Division 1 games in the Football League all going on together. So we were obviously at one. It was Galway and Kerry was the one that we were at. But we had 3 analysts sitting in production booths in Galway, in Salt Hill, where the match was on. But they were all watching the 3 other matches and giving live updates on what was happening.
So back and forth.
And
showing the table live. And
showing the table live and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, for what might be classed as, the smaller of the main stations in Ireland, like, you really punch above their weight. Like, what the work they do and the effort they put into live sport is sensational. Like, I mean, it's obviously rugby, horse racing, Wimbledon as well?
Yeah, Wimbledon has been done, and the Tour de France, and boxing and all the rest of it. I mean, you're dead right. I mean, and we're the sort of the people who are sort of seen and heard and whatever, and we get the really easy stuff to do because there's a huge amount, like even that the technology that's required to put together those kind of live updates that you were talking about from the league, that's all done for weeks in advance, and that's done by a technical team that never see. And they're in the cave, doing all this stuff back at base and whatever. But so you've got like you could have 40 people working on a match for a Sunday.
It's amazing. It's unbelievable. And would you have a favorite sport like when you're when you get when you're out and about? Would you prefer hurling or Gaelic, or do you?
Yeah, but like I mean, everyone, it's kind of tricky because I suppose when the team is dominant in the way that Limerick are dominant now, it's harder to enjoy hurling, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. You kind of might watch near the end of the championship as much as not so much else.
Yeah. Now I'm a Waterford man, and I absolutely, when Waterford were playing Limerick the last day. It's like you're eating your fingernails, but you're.
And it was so close to you. Must be really like, oh.
Yeah, but I mean, so in that case, like normally hurling to me outstrips everything.
Yeah, a good game of hurling, I think.
A good game of hurling, and when you know that it's kind of you're guessing, so you'd be hoping that'll be the case, even though, as I say, Limerick are looking so strong, but they looked a bit vulnerable the last day. Football is tighter, there's no question. There's more teams in it, and like the bit of drama that's there. And I think football's actually it's really good at the moment. A lot of people give out about this over and back and kind of crossfield stuff, but I think teams are the good teams are moving on from that now. So the quality teams are playing a much more, imaginative game where they've a whole pile of sort of plays, if you like.
Yeah, I was at the Governor's Common the other day, and you could see set movements and plays all the time. As you said, like it's definitely becoming more meticulous. But again, if it's not a mad free-flowing game, then people say, oh, it's terrible. It's like, well, maybe there's a bit of ingenuity in what they're doing. It mightn't every moment be that, but as you said, the smarter teams, they'll just get smarter and probably find a way around it. Yeah. So go back to, obviously, it was Waterford to Spain, and how did you end up in Sligo then?
Oh, shit, now. What else only a woman?
There you go.
So I met Micheal while I was living in Spain, actually. And anyway, so she's from here, she's from Mullaghmore. And we had, when I came home then after 3 years in Spain, and wasn't quite sure where I was going. I was teaching, and we'd be up and down. We were living in Dungarvan at this stage, actually, just in the road from Ring. And we used to come up and down here. And then I just kind of figured, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do broadcasting-wise, and this coincided with the end of Ole Ole, and I wasn't sure where I was going and the thing. So I said, why not go up there? There's not a lot of activity in broadcasting terms up here, and there might be some opportunity. So we came up, and we tried it out, and it worked out very well. So we're here 20 years, and I do a lot of work now outside of broadcasting, but that kind of pulls the same skills in together, So whether
you have your own media company as well, O Media, and I mean, your diary must be very busy most weeks of the year, but then you're hugely involved in the connection with Grange. Did you live there for a while? Obviously, it's the Mullaghmore connection. Is that the... Well,
no, I mean, we lived in Grange. So we lived in town first, and we were there for a number of years, and then we moved out to Grange when the kids were getting a little bit bigger, and we needed a bit more space in the house and whatever. And that's where I got hooked in with the Armada. So. I suppose that connection, the original connection with Spain, was always fascinating.
So I was going to say, were you more into it for the historical thing, or was it was a community group? I'd love to get involved, help out. It's probably a mix of both. Really,
it was a bit of both, and it's such an exotic story. It's
insane. And I mean, we were talking before about the visitor centre out there. What they've done out there is amazing. The movie is well worth the watch, and I know we've talked previously as well about the conference coming up and all that. But I think it's a great connection. It must be a great social thing too for all these people to be working together on a cool project. And as you said, it's great that it's been highlighted. You know what I mean? That's a huge tourist attraction as well. And maybe going to be bigger and bigger with time. Yeah,
and that's the aim. I mean, we remember those pictures from when the wrecks were rediscovered in 2015, and those cannon were all lifted out of the water. I mean, that was an international story. So, I remember we did a sort of a trawl of what media outlets had picked that up, and it was all around Ireland. Obviously, all the main papers and RT and everybody had a TG4. But then outside of it, it was in the New York Times. It was in all of the main Spanish dailies. These pictures of cannon lying on the seabed at Stregia and elsewhere, and it's a huge opportunity for Sligo. These cannon are now being conserved in Dublin by the the team at the National Museum, and our hope would be that they would come back to Sligo in time as part of a main visitor attraction in Sligo town now, not in Grange, but in Sligo. Grange is always going to be a visitor centre, an opportunity for people to discover a little bit more about the Armada, but it's not a museum, and you need like very high-end museum experiences to house artifacts that are as priceless as these are, because they're amazing and they're in amazing condition. So we're hoping down the line that Sligo will get itself together to apply and obtain the funding for, you know, a museum that will be like state of the art.
And if it was, I asked a previous guest there before about if I give them €10 million, what do you think Sligo was missing? And they said just one big activity or one big centre or museum or something. So like, I mean, the facets are there maybe, but maybe just to pull it all together. So I think your team will have an awful lot of the groundwork done for that facility. And
that's why we're banging on the door with this conference, because we need to keep the conversation going that this is a brilliant resource. And like when you think of all the tourists that come into the country, and we talk about the challenges that we have to get them west of the Shannon, and you know, there's this whole idea in tourism speak about the culturally curious. And like, if you're culturally curious, what better thing to have than to have a differentiating product on your doorstep that you can bring people in. And as you said, if you put a roof on the place, you have it there for 12 months of the year. So if this was built a proper facility, and the whole museum experience is changing, and actually that's one of the big talks that we're going to have at the conference as well in May, is about this whole idea of what is a modern museum. It's no longer just a thing where you put artifacts in and you look at them. This is all about virtual reality, augmented reality, screens floor to ceiling, telling the stories in different ways that appeal in particular to younger people. And then in among all that, then you have your artifacts, and you have your mounted cannons, and you have your gun carriage wheels, and you have all the other special artifacts that were discovered, along with a whole pile of other things that Sligo has, like the Neolithic landscape, like Yeats, you know, and other aspects of Sligo, that the music, you know, that cultural heritage.
I often said there should be like some museum cultural centre that kind of takes it all in, like even from Westlife to Yeats and everything, that you can go in and get all the information and see it all. Well, in 2017, I was beginning of the season, I asked you who's going to win the All-Ireland hurling, and you predicted Galway correctly, so I can't let you leave now. Maybe now you're not allowed by TG4, are you? Who would you, right this second, it's April, who would you say will win the hurling and football?
Well,
I mean, we'll all be wrong maybe, but...
And I'm always wrong with these things.
Okay, so get on the bookies.
So that was the one time.
These.
I'm amazed that you said I got one.
Yeah, no,
right.
I always remember you said, it's Galway this year, and then they beat Waterford, unfortunately.
I was going to say, who did they beat in that final? Oh, no, I know. Yeah, we're still getting over that. Anyway, I mean, in terms of hurling, I suppose it's awful hard to look beyond that.
I mean, Waterford came close to them, but would you have any?
But I thought that before the game, if you're going to play Limerick, play them the first day, before they get their stuff together, and they'll improve. And I have a feeling that Limerick will improve over time. I mean, the football is going to be really interesting, because you've definitely got 5 or 6 teams. Now, they are the same teams probably, but they're actually really close together at this stage. Yeah. So people are talking, you know, seriously about Dublin now being back, and I mean, it's amazing to see that they have Jack McCaffrey back and Paul Mannion, and who knows, we might see Stephen Cluxton before the season is out. You know, Kerry will be very close again. I mean,
so
Mayo.
You're saying Dublin, or are you saying Mayo?
No, I'm not, and I don't know.
It is actually nearly impossible.
It is impossible, and I mean, you know, a team from the north could do it yet. You know, you're talking about like Tyrone are. Okay, they haven't been great so far, but they're probably not a long way off it. Armagh, Derry have played, you know, have been very impressive at times in last year's championship, obviously.
Yeah, well, just on the day too, you know, just one thing goes the right way, and that can tip the balance.
And then you've got the 2 big teams in Connacht. I mean, I'm putting Galway and Mayo there. I would think that Roscommon are a little step behind. Sligo have had a brilliant year, but I mean, obviously the Connacht final is going to be a massive challenge for them. But you know, Galway and Mayo, and you know, Mayo new management. I think it's kind of interesting this year because you've got this All-Ireland series that's so different. Like it's brand new.
The diary is a bit much more different. You can't plan yourself. You used to plan it like
exactly. And I think that form now is irrelevant. You know, it's like it's nice for teams to be winning. But I think it didn't cost Mayo a whole pile to lose that game against Roscommon, for example. I think that they went out saying, we're in the round of 16. They could have 7 other games. You know, you've got the 3 games in the group, potentially a 4th game coming out playing 2nd and 3rd, and then quarterfinal, semi-final, final. So that's like an entire championship season.
Full season, this is enough. It's nearly broken up to 3 parts now. Like,
so for amateur players, how are you going to gauge, you know, how they can... So it's all about getting the momentum right and keeping the positive form. But you know, if you're in a tough province now, you'd nearly be saying you have to prioritize. Will I stay and try to get Ulster, or will I try and prepare myself? It'd be very hard for an Ulster team to do both.
I know it's such a long journey and tough journey. Do you love talking about sports? If you're in the pub, do you love to, or are you like, no, talk about something else?
I love it.
I'd be like, I would talk about sport all day, but then you often think of people in it, players. Some people actually don't, but you go, oh God, I'll talk all day about it.
I would. I mean, look, my wife would tell you to stay away from it, but it's not. No, I mean, and people do tend to want to talk sport and GAA, and it's
with
great.
yourself especially.
And you know, it's brilliant to be in that situation whereby you're going to matches and you're. Now I take a bit of time away from matches in the summer. That's for sure. I don't go to as many of them. Like even this week, we're out 4 or 5 times this week, with different matches at underage level, so I tend not to stay. I tend to stay at home and watch the matches on the Sunday at home.
Okay, and just actually enjoy them.
Enjoy them and get out into the garden afterwards, or go out and walk the dogs or do whatever. So all of that is kind of a part of it as well. That you know, you want to maintain the appetite for it, and no matter. It's like
doesn't want to become a chore.
No, and it hasn't, and it hopefully never will. But it's like, you know, you can be sitting in the sweet shop and thinking like, this, I'll never get off these things. But actually, you probably can get too much of anything.
It's amazing to be able to work in the world you love. And one question I want to ask you before I let you go: are you finding it harder and harder since you started interviewing sports stars? Is the answer still? I find as a viewer, it's just becoming a bit more safe and mundane, or maybe the GAA has the odd more character than you'd see in soccer matches now and that.
Well, look, like I really think it's a tricky one for the GAA player and manager now because they're amateurs. So they could say something and then they could be all over social media for a week. So I think there's a balance to be gotten. I think the media has a big responsibility in this as well, that, you know, asking about something that could be deemed personal or that could be deemed a slur on somebody's name, even if it happened on the field of play, like say somebody goes and, you know, is deemed to have taken a player out or whatever, and then going into that, and some of the stuff is terrible what gets written about these people online and said about these people online, and they are amateur players. So, but I do think on the flip side of that, that the people who are representing the games have a brilliant opportunity to make sure that the column inches are filled with GAA.
Very true.
You know, and you can say enough, and you can go and push the envelope. And when you see the American football players and coaches, they're masters at it in terms of making sure that there's enough said that there'll be commentary on that in the paper. Now they're pros and they probably have a lot of, you know, help going on in the background and getting them done. But I think the GAA is missing a huge amount of that, because there are periods in the year where the GAA isn't seen anywhere in terms of coverage in print media and online, because rugby and soccer take over. But the GAA matches are still going on, but they just haven't. They need to find ways of
there's even a bit of a strategizing there to go, like, we need this. But I mean, you as an interviewer must have gone, God, I'd like to get a bit of a bite, not even controversy, but just, you know, an angle. But you know that they probably won't answer that way, or
and you do keep pushing it. Like you try to get something always, and often saying nothing is nearly the best thing. You just leave the person answer.
And what was your most awkward moment live air? Did you ever? There's probably a famous McGuinness Cassidy moment, was there? That was was that cheeky Micheal just seeing what would happen?
No, I mean that was a very. I thought, like, I always think that I'm asking what somebody at home is going to want to know the answer to, and Kevin had said in that particular instance he decided to stand away. The timing was probably just a little bit unfortunate. I think Jim McGuinness was probably the only person in Letterkenny that day who didn't know Kevin Cassidy was an analyst with us. So this is only a couple of days after he had stepped away. And he came over just to do a quick soundbite interview with us as the ball was about to be thrown in. I'd say his head was elsewhere, and then we asked him the question, and he didn't enjoy it, and it kind of spiraled from there. So look, these things happen. It's live TV, and absolutely, it would never stop you from wanting to go and ask somebody, give someone a grilling. I remember there was another one with Mickey Hart, and with other managers where you got them. Dave Fitzgerald is a great example too of somebody who give you a good line, you know, and but you're right. There's a lot more media management of people nowadays. Like you'd see a lot, and that's to the detriment of the game, because I think it's probably gone a little bit. Those opportunities that I was saying, like you don't need to say masses of stuff, but you can say enough to keep the crowd engaged and to keep people talking on the way home. Did you hear what so and such said? Now we'll talk about it. Now the papers will be writing about it, and that's good for the game and the exposure of the game.
I mean, I would fast forward a lot of the manager interviews. Porrick Joyce could be quite straight, and even Davy Burke. There's a few there, but an awful lot of them are like, sure, I can nearly lip read what they're going to say. Like, you know what I mean? So yeah, as you said, it's definitely something they can be working on. I think to raise the profile, you know, without, as you said, not to be all controversy. So now we've kept you more than long enough. As I said, as a sports nerd myself, I was always fascinated, and obviously we're doing a little bit of media work, so it's always intriguing to see how these things actually work behind the scenes. So thanks so much for coming in, taking the time, and look at fair play and all the work you're doing out in Grange as well, and hopefully the conference goes well on May 24th, 25th, and we give a little plug to that, SpanishArmadaIreland.com, anyone that wants to see what's going on. And even if you don't get the conference, the visitor centre, all the trails you've done out there is amazing, and watch the movie.
Thanks for asking me on.
No problem. Thank you very much. So that was Micheal O'Donnell. As I said, you will know them from as being the GAA anchor on TG4, amongst many other things. Thanks again to Brian behind the cameras here, who's been doing all the shooting and editing. And thanks to the team here at the Radisson Hotel, who have lent us this beautiful room. It's called the Baymount Room in their business centre. So again, if you are looking for a space for meetings or conferences, you won't get a nicer place with a better view. We'll see you all again next time. Thanks very much. If you liked what you just seen, don't forget to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel here. We've loads of great interviews from a load of really interesting people over the series. And if you're on social media, which I'm sure loads of you are, we are on Instagram and Facebook, so give us a follow there.